Welcome back to the deep dive. We usually tackle like these big topics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But today, things are getting kind of personal.
Oh,
We were thinking about all those awesome goals you've been sharing with us, and
yeah.
it got us thinking about this book we read, Stop Self Sabotage by Dr. Judy Ho.
Oh, interesting.
We thought it'd be super fascinating to see if any of Dr. Ho's insights apply to your specific aspirations.
Yeah, that's a great idea. It's so easy to get caught up in all the excitement of goal setting.
Right.
But I think a lot of times we overlook these hidden patterns that can kind of trip us up along the way.
Totally.
I think Dr. Ho's work really shines a light on those self-sabotaging tendencies that we all have.
Exactly. It's like we have the best intentions,
Yeah.
right? But then something just holds us back.
Right.
Dr. Ho, she breaks down these patterns with this acronym. She calls it LIFE.
Okay.
It stands for low or shaky self-concept, internalized beliefs, fear of change or the unknown,
Mm-hmm.
and then excessive need for control.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, and what's so fascinating, I think, is how these elements can intertwine.
Totally.
Let's take your goal of writing a book, for example.
Okay.
If you have a low self-concept, you might have trouble believing in yourself. Believing in your ability to even write something.
Oh, yeah.
That's worthwhile.
Makes total sense.
And
Like that little voice in your head that's always
Yeah.
saying oh, who are you to write a book?
Exactly. And those internalized beliefs can even be trickier.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, maybe someone in your past criticized your writing and now you carry that with you,
Oh,
even if it's not true.
wow. Yeah.
It's powerful stuff.
And then on top of all that, there's that fear of the unknown,
Oh, yeah. Big time.
like putting yourself out there, sharing your work with the world.
Ugh. Yeah.
So scary.
Absolutely. I think our brains are just wired to seek safety and comfort.
Right.
So anything that disrupts that can trigger all this resistance, and that resistance can manifest in a need for control. So we try to manage every aspect of the process to avoid those scary unknowns.
Oh, I can totally relate to that.
Oh, yeah.
I get so caught up in the planning and outlining that I never actually start writing.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's like I'm trying to control every possible outcome instead of just letting the creative process flow.
That's a classic example of how the need for control can backfire.
No.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Dr. Ho identifies 6 common self-sabotage triggers that often stem from these LIFE elements.
Okay.
She calls them overgeneralizing or catastrophizing, shoulds, black and white thinking, mind reading,
Oh.
discounting the positive, and personalization.
Whoa, that's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, let's break those down.
Okay.
You mentioned that you sometimes struggle with procrastination.
Oh, all is right.
Dr. Ho, she talks about shoulds as a major trigger for this.
Hmm.
Are you constantly feeling pressured by all the things you should be doing, even if they're not truly important to you?
That's a great question. I think shoulds often stem from those internalized beliefs that we were talking about earlier. They create this sense of obligation
Yeah.
that can be totally paralyzing.
It's like you're trying to live up to this imaginary standard
Yes.
instead of following your own path.
Right. And then there's black and white thinking, which Dr. Hose illustrates so well with Jack's story.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
Jack's applying for jobs, but he's trapped in this all or nothing mindset.
Oh.
It's either he aces the interview and gets the job immediately,
Mm.
or it's a complete disaster and he's publicly humiliated.
Oh, I've been there. It's like you can't see any shades of gray.
Right.
Everything is either a success or a failure.
Exactly. And in Jack's case, this type of thinking stems from a deep fear of change and a shaky self-concept. He assumes that all the interviewers are judging him harshly.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, that makes him just want to avoid applying altogether.
It's like those negative thoughts just become a self-fulfilling prophecy. You psych yourself out before you even give yourself a chance.
Exactly. And then there's mind reading, which can be so detrimental.
Ugh. Tell me about it.
It's that tendency to assume we know what others are thinking.
Oh, yeah.
And it's usually assuming the worst.
Oh, I am a champion mind reader.
Oh, yeah.
I can create these elaborate stories in my head about what people are thinking about me, even though I have zero evidence to support those thoughts.
And I think we all do it to some extent, but when it becomes a pattern,
Right.
it can really undermine our confidence and, even our relationships.
And we can't forget about discounting the positive, which I think we're all guilty of.
Oh, for sure.
It's like you achieve something great and then you just instantly brush it off
Oh, yeah.
as if it was just luck or no big deal.
Yeah.
It's almost like we don't believe we deserve success.
Right. And that ties back to low self-esteem and,
Right.
those internalized beliefs. We minimize our accomplishments because deep down we don't believe we're good enough.
Okay, so we talked about shoulds, black and white thinking, mind reading, discounting the positive. What about overgeneralizing and personalization?
Right. Well, overgeneralizing is like taking one negative experience and blowing it out of proportion.
Okay.
And making sweeping statements like, I'm always a failure or nothing ever goes my way. But it's based on just this one little thing.
I might do that too. One little setback and suddenly the whole world is ending.
Exactly. And personalization is similar.
Okay.
But instead of generalizing, you take everything personally, even if it has nothing to do with you.
Okay.
You're just constantly looking for evidence to confirm your negative beliefs about yourself.
So we've explored Dr. Ho's LIFE framework
Yeah.
and these 6 sneaky self-sabotage triggers.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see how these concepts could definitely play a role in some of the goals you've been sharing with us.
Yeah, for sure.
What stands out to you so far? Are any of these triggers resonating with your experience?
Let me think about that for a sec.
You know, it's amazing how much we can learn from just paying attention to our thoughts and actions.
Oh, totally.
It's like shining a light on all those subconscious patterns that have been running the show without us even realizing it.
Absolutely. And, one of the things Dr. Ho emphasizes is that self-sabotage often stems from this desire for safety and comfort.
Yeah.
It's a primal instinct.
Yeah, our brains are wired to avoid pain and seek pleasure.
Right.
So it's like we develop all these coping mechanisms that might have served us in the past,
Right.
but now they're holding us back.
Yeah, it's like staying in that cozy but cramped comfort zone.
Right.
Because stepping outside feels way too risky.
That's a great analogy.
Thank you.
And that fear can manifest in all sorts of ways.
Oh, yeah.
From procrastination to perfectionism to people-pleasing.
Yeah, all the things.
We talked about your goal of launching a podcast.
Yeah.
Do you ever find yourself getting stuck in those planning stages? Obsessing over the equipment or the format instead of just hitting record?
Oh, absolutely. It's like I try to make everything perfect before I even put myself out there.
Right.
Dr. Ho would probably say that's a classic example of how fear of the unknown can lead to self-sabotage.
Totally. And that's why it's so important to develop those strategies to interrupt those patterns and choose a different path.
Yeah.
Luckily, Dr. Ho provides us with a toolbox full of techniques in her book.
Oh, that's great.
She even has a whole appendix
Wow.
dedicated to what she calls self-sabotage busters.
Okay.
These are quick and effective ways to stop self-sabotage in its tracks.
I love that. It's like having a first aid kit for your mind.
Right.
When you feel those negative thoughts creeping in, you can reach for one of these tools to help you regain control.
Okay, so let's dive into some of these self-sabotage busters.
Okay.
One that really resonated with me is called ET squared, which stands for emotion, thought, trigger. It's like this super simple but powerful way to kind of break down those overwhelming moments when you're feeling anxious or frustrated.
It's all about getting curious about your inner experience.
Right.
Instead of getting swept away by your emotions. You just pause and ask yourself, what is going on here?
Exactly. Let's say you're feeling really stressed out about an upcoming presentation.
Yeah.
Using ET squared, you would first identify the emotion, which in this case would be stress.
Okay.
Then you rewind and try to pinpoint the thought that triggered that stress.
Okay.
Maybe it's something like, oh, I'm going to mess this up, or everyone's going to think I'm incompetent.
And then you dig even deeper
Okay.
to identify the trigger,
Right.
like that underlying belief or fear that's fueling those negative thoughts.
So maybe it's a fear of public speaking,
Right.
or a belief that you're not good enough.
Exactly.
I love how this technique just helps us get to the root of the problem
Yeah.
instead of just reacting to those surface emotions of the...
It helps you to slow down
Right.
so you can really understand what's going on.
And then once you identify that trigger, then you can start to challenge those negative thoughts.
Right.
And choose a different response.
You reclaim your power.
So powerful.
Another technique Dr. Ho suggests is thought clouds,
Okay.
which is this mindfulness exercise for detaching from those racing thoughts.
Oh, I've heard of this. It's like watching clouds drift by in the sky.
Exactly.
You observe them, but you don't get caught up in them.
You just recognize that they're temporary
Yep.
and that they'll eventually pass.
With thought clouds, you just sit quietly, close your eyes, and notice your thoughts without judgment.
Right?
Don't try to push them away or analyze them.
Just let them come and go like clouds.
I'm a big fan of mindfulness practices.
Oh, me too.
Do you find that these types of exercises help you manage those self-sabotaging tendencies?
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's so easy to get caught up in that mental chatter. Mindfulness helps me to create some distance between myself and my thoughts.
Okay.
It reminds me that I'm not my thoughts. I have thoughts,
Oh,
but they don't define me.
that's so powerful.
Right.
It's like taking back control of your mind
Mm-hmm.
instead of letting those negative thoughts run the show.
Exactly. And you know, sometimes all you need is like a simple shift in language
Okay.
to change your whole outlook.
Interesting.
Dr. Ho talks about this technique called yes, but,
Okay.
where you reframe those negative thoughts into a more balanced perspective.
Hmm.
It's a way of acknowledging the validity of that negative thought, but then add in a but to introduce a more like positive or empowering perspective.
So, for example, if your thought is, I'm terrible at networking,
Mm-hmm.
you might reframe it as, yes, networking can feel awkward, but I'm getting better at it each time I try.
Exactly. It's about finding that kernel of truth in the negative thought,
Uh-huh.
but then shifting the focus to something more constructive.
Okay, so we talked about ET squared.
Thought clouds. Yes,
Yeah.
but are there any other self-sabotage busters that you find particularly helpful?
Well, Dr. Ho also talks about the power of labeling your thoughts,
Okay.
which is this quick and easy way to create some distance between you and those negative thought patterns.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Hmm.
I'm always looking for like simple but effective strategies.
It's really straightforward. Instead of saying, I'm a failure, you might say, I'm having the thought that I'm a failure.
Mm.
That subtle shift in language can make a big difference
Okay.
because it reminds you that you are not your thoughts.
Right.
You are the observer of your thoughts.
It's like stepping back and witnessing those thoughts instead of getting completely absorbed by them.
Yes.
I can see how that would be really helpful in those moments when you're feeling overwhelmed by negativity.
Exactly. And, sometimes those self-sabotaging thoughts, they're fueled by anxiety or stress.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Ho recommends a technique called Navy SEAL box breathing. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this Navy SEAL box breathing.
Well, as the name suggests, it's a technique used by Navy SEALs
Wow,
to stay calm under pressure.
that's awesome.
It's incredibly simple but very effective.
Okay,
You breathe in for a count of 4,
okay.
hold your breath for a count of 4,
Mm.
exhale for a count of 4,
Uh,
and then hold the exhale for a count of 4.
wow, that does sound simple. I'm definitely going to try that the next time I'm feeling stressed or anxious.
Yeah, it's great.
It's amazing how much power we have over our physiological and emotional states just by changing our breathing.
Absolutely. It's like hitting the reset button on your nervous system.
I love it.
And speaking of powerful techniques,
Okay,
there's another one Dr. Ho calls physicalize the emotion.
okay.
It's a visualization exercise for processing and releasing those like intense feelings that can sometimes lead to self-sabotage.
Okay, I'm really curious about this one. Walk me through it.
Okay, so let's say you're feeling overwhelmed by anxiety. With physicalize the emotion, you close your eyes,
Okay.
take a few deep breaths,
Huh.
and imagine that anxiety as a physical object right in front of you.
Interesting. So I'm literally picturing my anxiety as a physical thing.
Uh-huh.
Okay. What might that look like?
It could take any form that feels right to you.
Yeah.
You might see it as like a dark cloud or a heavy weight or a tangled knot.
Mm-hmm.
Then you use your senses to explore this object.
Okay.
What does it look like? What does it feel like?
Right.
What does it sound like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like?
I'm getting chills just thinking about it. I can see how engaging all those senses would really bring that abstract emotion into a more concrete form.
Exactly. And once you've kind of explored it,
Uh-huh.
you can start to transform it.
Okay.
You can imagine shrinking it down to the size of a pea,
Mm-hmm.
changing its color,
Okay.
or making it lighter. It's like taking back control of that emotion and making it less intimidating.
That's brilliant. It's like you're literally taking that heavy, overwhelming feeling and making it manageable.
Right. And, you know, sometimes the best way to deal with those negative emotions is to simply do the opposite of what they're telling you to do.
You're talking about opposite action again.
Yes.
I love that technique. It's so counterintuitive,
Right.
but it really works.
It does.
So if you're feeling anxious and your urge is to isolate yourself,
Uh-huh.
opposite action would be to reach out to a friend or a loved one.
Exactly.
Or if you're feeling depressed and your urge is to stay in bed all day,
Yeah.
opposite action would be to get up, get dressed, and go for a walk.
Exactly. It's about breaking those negative cycles
Right.
and choosing behaviors that support your well-being.
It's like interrupting that autopilot response and consciously choosing a different path.
And sometimes all we need is like a little boost of positivity
Yeah.
to shift our perspective. Dr. Ho recommends creating a list of like pleasant activities
Yeah.
that you can do to lift your mood and increase those positive emotions.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
What are some things that you find helpful when you need a little mood boost?
Well, I love listening to upbeat music.
Oh, yeah.
It always gets me moving and grooving.
Right.
And spending time in nature is incredibly restorative for me.
Okay.
Just taking a walk in the park or hiking in the woods
I hear you on that.
does wonders for my mental and emotional state.
I'm a big fan of taking walks in nature, too.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a reset button for my brain.
And sometimes the best medicine is simply talking to someone you trust. You know, Doctor Who emphasizes the importance of social support
Yeah.
and encourages us to reach out to friends, family, or therapists when we're struggling.
Right.
It's like having a sounding board for those negative thoughts
Totally.
and a source of encouragement and perspective.
I couldn't agree more. Sometimes just saying those thoughts out loud can help you see them in a new light.
Right.
It's like you're releasing them from your head and giving them less power.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, if you're looking for a more structured way to process those thoughts and behaviors,
Oh.
Dr. Ho recommends writing out your ABCs.
Hmm.
This stands for antecedent behavior consequence.
Okay.
It's a helpful way to kind of map out those self-sabotaging patterns.
I remember you mentioning this technique earlier.
Yeah.
Can you remind me how it works again?
Sure. So you start by identifying the antecedent.
Okay.
That's the situation or trigger that led to the behavior, the self-sabotaging action.
Right.
And then you examine the consequence,
Okay.
the outcome or result of that behavior.
So let's say I have a deadline coming up
Okay.
and I'm feeling overwhelmed. The antecedent might be the pressure of the deadline. The behavior might be procrastination.
Right.
And the consequence might be feeling even more stressed and anxious as the deadline approaches.
Exactly. By seeing those patterns laid out,
Yeah.
you know, in black and white,
Right.
you can start to identify those triggers and choose a different response next time.
Right. It's like you're becoming a detective, investigating those self-sabotaging patterns so you can outsmart them.
And, you know, one of the most powerful techniques for overcoming those patterns is to create a specific plan
Okay.
for dealing with those challenging situations. Dr. Ho calls this technique if, when, then.
Okay.
It's a way to set yourself up for success by anticipating those obstacles
Right.
and having a predetermined response.
I love that. So instead of just hoping I'll make the right choice when faced with a challenge, I'm creating a clear roadmap in advance.
Exactly. So let's say your goal is to be more assertive in your communication,
Okay.
but you often find yourself holding back in meetings,
Uh-huh.
using the if, when, then
Yeah.
technique.
Mm-hmm.
You might say, if, when I feel hesitant to speak up in a meeting,
Okay.
then I will take a deep breath and share my idea.
That's so smart. It's like you're giving your future self instructions on how to handle those tricky situations.
Right. And the more specific you can be with those instructions,
The more likely you are to follow through.
we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've explored so many different techniques for combating self-sabotage,
Yeah.
from mindfulness exercises to reframing techniques, to visualization exercises, to action-oriented strategies.
It's like a buffet of self-sabotage busters.
It is. And the key is to find the techniques that resonate with you and incorporate them into your daily life.
It's not about trying to do everything at once.
Right.
It's about finding what works for you and building those healthy habits gradually.
Absolutely. And remember, self-sabotage is a common human experience.
Oh, for sure.
We all do it from time to time.
Yeah.
The key is to become aware of those patterns and develop strategies for interrupting them.
Exactly.
So as we reflect on all these self-sabotage busters, which ones stand out to you? Which ones are you most curious to try?
Well, I'm really intrigued by physicalize the emotion.
I think that could be a really powerful way for me to work through some of the anxiety that often leads to self-sabotage.
That's great. I'm excited to hear how it goes for you.
Thanks.
I'm personally drawn to the if, when, then technique.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
I think having those predetermined responses could be a game changer for me.
And, you know, we've talked about a lot of techniques today.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that, you know, this is a journey, not a destination.
Right.
There will be setbacks and challenges along the way.
Of course.
Yeah,
We're all human.
exactly.
We're all going to mess up sometimes.
The key is to keep learning, keep growing, and keep moving forward.
And most importantly, to be kind to ourselves along the way.
Absolutely. Self-compassion is the antidote to self-sabotage.
I love that. Self-compassion is so important.
It is.
We all deserve to be treated with kindness and understanding.
Yes.
Especially by ourselves.
Especially by ourselves.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into self-sabotage busters.
It has been.
I'm feeling so inspired and empowered to tackle those self-defeating patterns head on.
Me too.
Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into stop self-sabotage, there's one concept that just keeps bubbling up for me.
What's that?
We've talked about like all these triggers and all these techniques.
Right.
And even like how our brains are wired for safety and stuff. But what about the goals themselves?
Oh, yeah.
What if the goal itself is a form of self-sabotage?
That's a really good question.
Dr. Ho, she talks a lot about aligning our goals with our values.
Right.
And that feels like especially relevant here.
Absolutely. She uses this analogy of comparing our values to a compass.
Okay.
You know, if our goals are in sync with our values, it's like having that compass guiding us towards our true north.
Right.
But if they're misaligned, we end up just expending a lot of effort without getting closer to what really matters.
It's like spinning your wheels.
Totally.
You're busy.
Yeah.
You're checking things off your list. But there's this like underlying sense of emptiness.
Right.
Because it's not truly fulfilling.
It's not aligned.
We've talked about your dream of starting a business.
Yeah.
How do you see that goal connecting to like your core values?
That's a great question.
What are some of those peak moments for you?
Well, when I think about like my peak moments, those times when I felt like the most alive and fulfilled, creativity and connection, those always stand out.
Okay.
So for this business idea to truly feel aligned, it needs to tap into those values.
So maybe it's not just about launching any business.
Right.
It's about creating something that allows you to express your creativity and connect with others in a meaningful way.
Exactly.
That subtle shift in perspective can make a huge difference.
Oh, totally. It's like finding that sweet spot, you know?
Right.
Where passion, purpose, and practicality all intersect.
I love it. Dr. Who, she recommends that peak moment exercise.
Yeah.
To help us like uncover those core values. Right. It seems simple enough.
Yeah.
But I imagine it can be surprisingly profound.
It really can. It's like taking an inventory of your soul.
Wow.
You know, revisiting those experiences that brought you joy, a sense of purpose, deep satisfaction. Those moments hold clues to what truly matters to you.
So once you've identified those values, how do you practically like weave them into your goals?
I think it's about asking yourself some key questions, you know?
Okay.
Does this goal align with what I value most? Does it make me feel excited and energized, or does it feel heavy and draining? Is this something I'm doing for me?
Right.
Or am I trying to meet someone else's expectations?
Those are such powerful questions.
Yeah, they are.
And it might mean letting go of some goals that no longer serve you.
Yeah.
Even if they once felt important.
You got to have the courage to course correct, you know?
Right.
To realign your efforts with what truly matters.
We talked about all those self-sabotage busters, like ET squared,
Yeah.
opposite action. Do you think those techniques are still relevant, even if you've got your values and goals aligned?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're human, right? We're going to have moments of self-doubt,
Right.
fear,
Of course.
even laziness.
Yeah.
I think those techniques are like tools to help navigate those inevitable bumps in the road, you know, to keep moving forward, even when those self-sabotaging thoughts creep in.
It's like you're building resilience,
Totally.
equipping yourself to handle those challenges in a healthier, more constructive way.
Exactly. It's not about achieving perfection.
Right.
It's about developing a more supportive, more compassionate relationship with yourself.
At the beginning of this deep dive,
Yeah.
we talked about how you've been sharing some incredible goals with us based on everything we've discussed today. Is there anything you'd like to add or reframe or even let go of?
You know what? I think I've been holding on to a goal
Okay.
that's more about proving myself to others than about pursuing what truly lights me up. I think it's time to release that.
Okay.
And focus on something that feels more aligned with my values and my vision for the future.
That's fantastic. It takes a lot of courage to admit that and to make that shift.
Yeah, it does.
I have a feeling letting go of that goal is going to create so much space for something even more amazing to emerge.
Oh, I think you're right. It's both exciting and a little scary.
Yeah.
But mostly exciting.
It's like closing one chapter and opening another, filled with possibility and potential.
And you've got all these incredible tools from Dr. Ho's book to help you navigate that journey.
That's the beauty of this work.
It is.
It's not just about identifying self-sabotage. It's about empowering us to create a life that is truly aligned with who we are and what we want.
That's what the deep dive is all about.
Exactly. Equipping you with the knowledge and the insights to take those steps to create the change you want to see in your life.
So to everyone listening out there, we encourage you to keep exploring these concepts. Maybe revisit some of those self-sabotage busters. Try that peak moment exercise. Or ask yourself those tough questions about your goals and your values.
It's all about awareness, action, and most importantly, self-compassion.
Self-compassion.
Remember, you are worthy of achieving your goals.
Yes, you are.
And living a fulfilling life.
Totally.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Stop Self Sabotage.
It's been fun.
Until next time, keep diving.